Okay. Um, Welcome to Me Seattle's final Building Tenant Power Workshop of the year. My name is Kate Rubin. My pronouns are she, her. I am the organizing director at B Seattle. I'm joined tonight by my co-director, Tanya Moore, who will be doing the tech, um, as well as Shaun Scott, Scott Berkley, and Dr. Shirley Leung. I'm going to start us off tonight with a land acknowledgement. We are on the land of the Coast Salish peoples. I would like to recognize that we are occupying the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people, past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. As we do this important work on these lands, we understand that our collective liberation cannot happen without Indigenous sovereignty. We encourage each of you to sign the petition for federal recognition of the Duwamish tribe. And if you're able, visit the Longhouse and pay rent to the Duwamish. You can learn more from Real Rent Duwamish. We'll include a link for them in the resource guide that we'll drop in the chat, and we'll send a copy of it after the presentation. Our resource guide also contains contact information for the Renting in Seattle Helpline, the Department of Construction and Inspections, also known as SDCI. They're responsible for enforcing our landlord-tenant laws. The Seattle Office for Civil Rights, as well as a bunch of other organizations that provide services to renters. I'm going to pass the mic off to my colleague Tanya to share a few upcoming events, and then we will jump into the workshop. Take it away, Tanya.
All right. Sorry, I'm maneuvering here. Get things to do what they're supposed to do. All right. Sorry, y'all. Patience as I've been traveling, so I'm having to maneuver a little bit differently today. Get to where we are. All right. Saturday, December 21st, 4:21 p.m. to 6 p.m. at Tree of Life, Victor Steinbrueck Park, Seattle. The National Homeless Persons Memorial Day, held by the Women in Black Solstice Vigil. Stand with Wheel to remember and honor the 250 plus homeless people who died outside in King County this year, starting with a sunset ritual at 4:21 p.m. at the Tree of Life and followed by a silent vigil from 5 to 6 p.m. on City Hall steps. Tuesday, January 7th from 1 to 2:45 p.m. online via Zoom, Solid Ground presents Rent Smart, Learning the Basics. Learning the basics, landlord and tenant duties, how to make a repair request, how to break your lease. Join Solid Ground tenant counselors as they discuss tenants' rights and procedures under the Residential Landlord Tenant Act of Washington State. Learn how to make a formal repair request and find out when you can break your lease. Wednesday, January 8th from 3 to 4:45 p.m. online via Zoom. Solid Ground presents Rent Smart, Learning the Basics again, in case you weren't able to attend on the 7th. On Thursday, January 9th, 6:30 to 8:30 p.m. at El Centro de la Raza, room 311, in the Roberto Maestas Digital Literacy Lab, or online via Zoom. Please join B Seattle and the Seattle Renter Organizing Council at the monthly meeting. Wednesday, January 22nd, from 3 to 4:45 p.m. online via Zoom, Solid Ground presents their Rent Smart series, Looking for Housing. In this webinar, Solid Ground tenant counselors will focus on where to search for housing, tenant screening, best tips for finding a rental, tax credit housing, holding deposits when applying for a rental, overcoming rental barriers such as criminal history and evictions on your record. And on Wednesday, January 22nd, from 6 to 8 p.m. online via Zoom, will be B Seattle's January Building Tenant Power Workshop. Seattleites overwhelmingly support social housing, but the Chamber of Commerce and Seattle City Council have taken action to block it from being adequately funded. At this month's workshop, B Seattle will be joined by House Our Neighbors, to discuss why the initiative wasn't on the ballot in November and explain what voters need to know before the special election in February. And now I will hand it back over to Kate.
Thank you so much, Tanya. Can you hop to the next slide, which is actually just a cute little picture of S-Rock. So before we jump into this workshop, I just want to tell folks about, there was an article released on the Stranger today leaking some of the tenant protections that the landlord lobby is hoping to overturn. And it's our understanding that these are moving forward and that there is a lot of support on the back end at City Hall. And renters have kind of really taken a hit this year. Tenant services, which funds like it's almost entirely funding B Seattle, was cut by $1 million, down from $2.5 million to about $1.5 million for all of tenant services, and that includes right to counsel and legal services. So the city's really not investing in renters. Small organizations like B Seattle, we may actually not survive unless we can find alternate sources of funding pretty quickly. We're looking at potentially sunsetting as early as February or March. But while we're here and while we're still funded, we are going to fight. We're going to fight hard to keep these renter protections, to protect renters. But what we are hoping to do, in addition to working with the Seattle Renter Organizing Council, is work with some folks who are willing to have small group conversations with their council members. They tend to see people from organizations who are protecting renters as representing special interest groups, but do take conversations with people who are just constituents a little bit more seriously. So if you are somebody who is potentially willing to talk with your council member, I would be happy to coach you, talking points, give guidance, and help you get this set up if that's something that you're willing to take on in the next, probably my hope is that this won't actually be presented until next year, but there is technically, I think, one more meeting. So we'll keep you updated though. So I'm going to put my email here in the chat. You've probably already received emails from me, but please feel free to reach out directly to me and we can have a conversation. And so with that, I would like to hand the mic over to our first guest speaker of the evening, Shaun Scott. Shaun is the state representative-elect for the 43rd Legislative District. Shaun's going to speak about the statewide efforts in Olympia that support better land use and social housing. Thank you so much for being here, Shaun. Take it away.
Absolutely. It's great to be with everybody. Katie, thank you so much for the invitation, or for the introduction, Laura, for the invitation to speak this evening. I was actually going to ask if we could take me off of Spotlight. I'm not particularly keen on seeing my face that large in pretty much any context. I think it is also good for just the nature of what we're talking about to keep all of us in focus, because really all of us are going to be the ones that are going to be responsible for pushing this movement for a more fair Washington state, which includes rental protections for people in districts like mine in the 43rd LD, which I was elected to represent in November. We are upwards of 70% renters. We include in my district neighborhoods like Capitol Hill, Fremont, the University District, downtown Seattle, Belltown, areas that have really strong political history of engagement around housing rights. And that's something that we're going to have to continue. as more and more renters are facing the squeeze, not only from unaffordability, but facing the squeeze from, unfortunately, a council that seems kind of bent to continue rolling back renter protections. And so I think state legislature policies that are emerging from the state legislature, excuse me, are going to be an important line of defense for working people, everyday people, people who just want to live in dense neighborhoods and enjoy the amenities that are present in them. To give you I wanted to talk a little bit about our efforts in the present to make sure that we're doing right by renters in Washington State, but I also think it's important for us to consider this issue in its historical dimensions as well, just so that we know that the fight for more rental protections, the fight for social and affordable housing that I know so many on this call care about, we know that this is a fight that is not one that we are having to invent in our present time. I moved to Seattle in May of 1992 from New York City with my dad. It was, I think I was one of thousands of people that were drawn, or my family, I should say, were about one of thousands of families, households that were drawn to Seattle. Because at that time, the thinking in the early 90s was that Seattle was sort of a city of the future, a city that had all of the buzz of East Coast cities like New York or Chicago, but fewer of their problems, as the conventional thinking went. I mean, there were buzzing headlines about Seattle and, outlets like Time Magazine, Newsweek, the New York Times at that stage that encouraged people to move here. And we were renters. At that time, in the early 90s, Mayor Norm Rice was the mayor of the city of Seattle. And he was at that point really kind of setting in place the legislative context that I think we are still battling in and against, the creation of the urban village strategy, which is the result of one of Seattle's, if not actually Seattle's, comprehensive plans that was designed to sort of ameliorate concerns in a lot of old school neighborhoods that had historically honestly been strongholds of segregation, knowing that there was state law in the early 1990s that mandated cities to grow sustainably with a certain amount of rental units. This urban village strategy was devised by Mayor Norm Rice at that time, and it was one that concentrated most of our urban development and most of our rental housing in about 24 pockets in the city. The University District, some areas in South Seattle, the center of Seattle, Capitol Hill, et cetera. And make no mistake about it, those were really intended to be the compromise in a lot of ways. There were a lot of proposals at that time that were on the table to tax the ultra wealthy to pay for affordable housing. This is, again, the early 90s that I'm describing, proposals that were on the table to build out extensive bike networks, such as the kind that we used to have at the turn of the 19th to the 20th century in Seattle. But the urban village strategy is one that we're kind of running up, against the limits of at present, because so much of the rental housing that we are able to build, to the extent that we are able to build it in a city that has widespread apartment bans as law, most of that growth was going to be concentrated in these urban villages. And there's the material impact that had on our city and the people who live here. I think it was a policy measure that, though better than nothing, made our city a lot less inclusive. There's also the psychological ramifications of that urban village strategy, which is that we kind of believe that renters' rights are a sectoral issue. We have come to think of our city politics as one that deals with rental rights, or our city politics straightforwardly is one that seems to deal with rental rights because it has to, not necessarily as a robust expression of the will of, a majority renter city. When you go to City Hall, most of the voices that you hear around many policy considerations are dominated by people that are fortunate enough to own property. Most of the concerns that we have with respect to public safety, the agenda around transportation, conversations about our civic outcomes are really dominated mostly by people that do not live in urban villages. And I don't think that it's too much of a stretch to say that urban villages are in some ways a continuation or an extension of a segregationist framework, though it is not strictly racially segregated. It is definitely the case that urban villages have legal and physical roots in the fact that apartments could only be built in certain sections of the city, were designed explicitly in the early 1920s when our first zoning code was devised to keep people of color out of neighborhoods like Wallingford, Green Lake, etc. So we're in a lot of ways, I think, battling the long legacy of racial segregation in Washington state. This is a battle that, early in my career as a lobbyist, I tried to do something about, and working in concert with Representative Frank Chop, we were able to pass a bill, HB 1474, which is a bill that created a housing and home covenant home ownership act, essentially a tax on real estate transactions that then created a fund for prospective first-time Black and brown home buyers who were impacted by racial segregation. And yet we also know that I don't think that legal strategies alone that double and triple down on home ownership are going to get us to a place where we're as equitable a city as we could possibly be. So we want to see some of that revenue that resulted from HB 1474 definitely be directed into rental assistance. That's something that I want to be working on when I start my career as a lawmaker in January, when we are sworn in at the legislative session at the top of next year. But I think it's pretty much every expert who has seriously studied this issue, including the Department of Neighborhoods in 2018, have acknowledged that our city's current way of dealing with housing considerations with neighborhoods that are mostly dominated by single-family zones, policy decisions that once again deal with renters' issues seemingly as a chore in many cases. That framework has made us a less fair city, and there's a lot that we can do at the state level about that. But I also think that it's going to be important for tenants' rights organizing in major cities to drive the issue, not only in Seattle, but in Spokane and in Yakima, Bellevue. We know that we have robust conversations that are taking place in the city halls of those cities as well about what we can do to make Washington a more hospitable place for renters. So one of the things that I also think that we want to make sure that we do is pay attention to sort of not just the material and sort of political significance of this conversation, but also understanding that there's a lot that we can do to make sure renters are more enfranchised in our civic discussions. So the conversation about moving or allowing localities, I should say, to move their elections to even years would do something to increase participation in local elections by renters. I think that, we all have gotten used to seeing sort of those fragmented maps every election night, that illustrate ostensible political divides between red areas, so-called red areas, and blue areas nationwide, red states and blue states nationwide, to the extent that there is a local analog for that polarization, if you could call it that, in Seattle. It exists according to areas that have much more renters and those that have fewer. Areas that tend to have many more renters, I can attest, and here in the 43rd LD, tend to elect candidates that are, to say the very least, more progressive. Our district in the 43rd LD is the most dense legislative district in the entire state of Washington. At the same time that it includes neighborhoods like Capitol Hill and Fremont, it also includes a lot of neighborhoods that are proximal to those. So, Montlake or Portage Bay. And those voters just sent the first socialist to the Washington State Legislature in over 100 years here in the 43rd LD. And I don't think that that's a mistake, because I think that the mores that people have when they are closer to one another, living in concert with one another, enjoying the benefits of density, which are going to include mass transit and exposure to a very diverse range of viewpoints, I think that makes us a more cosmopolitan electorate. And those kinds of folks are the voters that we often hear from more so in even year elections. So we also want to be working to make sure that cities have the ability to make that change And I think that we will start to see better legislative outcomes, not only at the state level, but also at the local level. Lastly, I want to just talk a little bit about the stakes for some of this discussion. It's significant to me that the Supreme Court, there's, I mean, a lot of Supreme Court decisions that have been handed down in recent years that sort of illustrate the unfortunate direction that our federal policymakers uh, have been taken in the age of Trump, which does not necessarily only include the years where Trump was actually president. Unfortunately, I do think that some of that backslide did happen over the last 4 years as well. We can expect more setbacks to progressive gains in the upcoming years. But it's significant to me that the Supreme Court decision that was handed down last year that essentially criminalized homelessness and criminalized visible poverty was one that emerged from a local decision that was taken in Grants Pass, Oregon. And if you go back and read the actual language of the decision that the Supreme Court handed down, they talk about the fact that they worked in concert with local leaders to arrive at the legal foundation of that codification of criminalizing home outdoor sleeping and criminalizing visible poverty in the form of homelessness. So what we see nationally as a result of what we allow to fester locally, the rollback of progressive gains that we're seeing in Washington, D.C., I think has roots, if not directly in Washington state, than it does in the decisions that we take in our city halls and in our school boards and in our state legislatures. So at the same time that I think that cities can play a really important role in unfortunately providing the legal support for a backslide in progressive gains, I think we can also do something in the other direction, and hopefully making Washington state the place that helps to point the way, along with a few other states, for what it looks like to have robust tenant protections and, more importantly, active and vibrant movements for tenants' rights. So I don't have too much more to say. I hope I finished within the 15-minute time frame. And if I did, if anybody has any questions, I'd love to sit and take a few of those as well.
We do have time for questions if anyone has any.
I guess I'll ask a question. This is Laura Lowe speaking, board member of B Seattle. In terms of your role in Olympia with like committees you're on, are there any particular things that we should be watching for that you plan to work on this session? Just curious.
Yeah, so I was happy to be seated on the House Finance, House Education, and the House Labor and Workplace Standards Committee, where I'll be serving as vice chair. And those three issues, I think, though they don't directly concern, they're not the House Housing Committee, for example. They are illustrative of a lot of issues, or do handle a lot of issues, I should say, that are going to impact renters, specifically the Finance Committee, where it's going to be our job to make sure that we are taxing the ultra wealthy to fund the few rental service programs that we have, to fund future expansions, hopefully, to the Housing Trust Fund. The real estate excise tax proposal would close to double state investments in affordable housing, which at present sit at about, I believe, somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 billion, B as in Bill Gates dollars, most of that going towards developer incentives. Additional money from the REIT would go towards the creation of a lot of the kinds of nonprofit, close to social housing that I think we would prefer to see. So I know that that's a proposal that's going to be making its way out of the House Finance Committee, if not this session, then next year. We're fortunate to have leadership on that committee and Representative April Berg that is committed to progressive revenue being this ongoing sustainable solution to funding services, including tenant services that we all use. And so we want to continue that framework, not just into this session, but into the future, because we know Washington is only going to become a more dense state. The population growth that we have been seeing in recent years is not, it's happening in cities. It's happening in neighborhoods like Capitol Hill that had to get redistricted to become much smaller, because most of the growth was concentrated in areas like Capitol Hill. So it's going to be of ongoing importance for us on those committees, specifically, once again, finance, to make sure that we're funding sustainably the programs that the new renters are going to be using in our state.
Thank you. There's also a question in the chat. Do you feel people in Olympia would be willing to truly listen to residents who are not their peers but are actually tenants?
I don't remember, and it's a good question from Jen. I don't remember the exact statistic, but I seem to recall an article that was published in recent years that was sort of breaking down um, the paucity of labor of tenants that are in the state legislature, something like literally just a handful, maybe 3 or 4 renters in the state ledge. And then many times more people who are actual landlords, so people who owned property or were property managers, people who worked in the real estate industry. And our policy outcomes reflect that. You know, when you really go back and look at the legislative history of our state, going back to the foundations of statehood in the late 19th century, or the foundation of Washington Territory in the late 19th century and the eventual achievement of statehood, what you'll find is that protecting private property was really kind of the entire purpose of devising state government. It's the reason why we most of our tax laws are centered around what you can and can tax with respect to property. It is very much central to the reason why people ever wanted to move out to a state like Washington, certainly in the so-called frontier years, the idea that you could have acres and acres that were mandated by the federal land trust program. And so we're still, this conversation is really taking place not only in the kind of more recent policy consideration of or policy context of sort of urban villages, but in a more generations long context of our state policymakers not being very responsive to the needs of people who do not own property. And so that's a long-winded way of saying that I think our legislative outcomes are starting to get better to the extent that we've started to elect more people of color, working class candidates of all races, renters of all races in recent years. But unfortunately, I do think that we are running up against a lot of opposition from people that really see the role of the state legislature as one that's designed to uphold the rights of people who have significant investment in property. And that, as we know, often plays out as an oppositional relationship when it comes to tenants' rights.
Okay. Thank you so much for being here, Shaun. And we're really excited to see what you're gonna do at the Washington State Legislature. It's really nice to have a housing champion and a renter holding it down. And so with that, before we transition to our next speaker, I'm going to put you all in breakout rooms just for a little bit. I would like for you to have a conversation with each other about what your ideal housing would look like for yourself and for your community as you age. So if you are a young person, think about how you want to grow old and where you want to live and what kinds of accommodations you would need to stay rooted in your community. Wow, I had a lot of people drop off there. People are scared to chat with each other. I get it. It's evening. It's been a long week and it's only Wednesday, but we're still gonna do it. But we'll keep it short and we'll bring you back to the breakout rooms. So just give me 1 second. Let me make sure that there's everyone. I'm gonna actually make these a little bit smaller because we had so many people fall out. So there we go. Here we go. You should be invited into the breakout rooms. Welcome back. I hope that you had great conversations about your dream for Seattle, and we're going to revisit that. And now I would like to introduce our next speaker, Scott Berkley. Scott represents Tech for Housing on the Complete Communities Coalition. And Scott's going to speak about the intersection of zoning, the One Seattle Comprehensive Plan, and social housing. Go right ahead, Scott. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'll just put this up front that, historically zoning has been the punchline that people use when they want to talk about a boring governmental meeting or whatever. So I'll do my best to keep it lively and not put you all to sleep, and hopefully convince you why zoning actually matters, is important. Okay. Yeah, so my name is Scott Berkley, he, him. I am a member of Tech for Housing, which is a group of tech workers who believe Seattle should not be affordable exclusively to tech workers, and that it's important that we have a vibrant, inclusive city and community. So we're doing our best. Complete Communities Coalition is a group of quite a diverse set of organizations that have come together to work on our comprehensive plan, which is Seattle's once-in-a-decade opportunity to remove some of the barriers to housing and have abundance and nice things like social housing that are possible, but only if we fight for them. I am only speaking for Tech for Housing here, not for the coalition as a whole. We all agree on more housing is better. We disagree on some of the other issues, such as what Representative Shaun Scott was talking about, but we do what we can. We work with the allies we have. Okay. So comprehensive plan is mandated by state law. So this is something that every city and county in Washington state does once a decade to make sure that they're planning for growth. And the idea is that we should be building up rather than just sprawling endlessly into the mountains and paving over our farmland and forests. And it is better than nothing. We're doing better than certain states and cities because of this, but it doesn't always do as much as we would like. But we're right in the thick of it. So this is kind of our opportunity to push it forward and make it as good as it can be. So zoning that we'll kind of talk about is one component of it, but the comprehensive plan is there because they're planning all sorts of things. So not just housing, but transportation, major institutions like schools and hospitals and police and fire, parks, all sorts of good stuff. So if you have particular interests on certain things like that, you can also provide input on things other than just housing and zoning. But yeah, so this is our chance to either kind of re-entrench segregation and scarcity, or to kind of move to a more abundant housing opportunities. So I'm going to focus here on what this means for social housing. Tech for Housing has been a big supporter of House Our Neighbors and the possibility for social housing. And so just a reminder for anyone who maybe hasn't been up to speed on social housing, but we created 2 years ago, we created the Seattle Social Housing Developer, which will be the kind of like a public utility for housing that will build and rent out social housing. It will be publicly owned, permanently affordable, be available to a broad mixture of incomes and classes, so that we're not continuing to segregate and divide, and will not be subject to market speculation and profit incentives. So pictured here is an envisioning social housing exercise that House Our Neighbors did with an architecture firm. So at the basic level, social housing might look like any other apartment building that we have throughout Seattle. in the best form and most aspirational form. We're hoping that it can be even kind of more creative, such as the one that we have pictured here, where you really have a mixture of different housing unit types of like townhouses, co-living spaces, apartment, family size apartments, so that different people in different situations can all find something that's suitable to their needs in social housing, and lots of nice community amenities of open space, childcare facilities, grocery stores, whatever kind of things, ground level retail that might be suitable for the people living there. And as just a little bit of housing theory here of what we need to have a healthy housing options are the 3 S's. You need supply, subsidy, and stability. And social housing by itself, kind of written into the charter when we passed Initiative 135, does a lot to cover the bottom 2, the subsidy and stability. So we are right now working on getting Proposition 1A passed that will be a funding source to make sure there is revenue going into the social housing developer so that it can build, and the cross rent subsidization is also an important part of how that subsidy works. Stability are the things like the rent being capped at 30% of income, and some restorative justice components so that people, have the opportunity to stay in housing and don't get kicked out at the first sign of issues. But for better or worse, social housing is going to be subject to the same constraints on zoning and supply that any other type of housing is. So right now, as we'll see probably in the next slide, about 70% of Seattle's land area is ineligible to build denser, more affordable type housing like apartments. And that is going to make it that much more harder to build social housing than if we loosen those restrictions and open up the entire city for it. So yeah, if you like any kind of housing, and especially social housing, zoning is going to be important. So yeah, I guess here before we get to the maps, reasons that we should want a kind of more flexible or like zoning that allows for more housing options, more density. For social housing specifically, it will allow us to use our scarce land more efficiently. So we're hoping that the city or other entities will be able to donate surplus land to be built into social housing. But we might also be buying land, on an open market. And especially in a crowded city like Seattle, land is really the ultimately scarce resource. So having these kind of artificial constraints on how efficiently we can use our land is going to be one of the major constraints on how much social housing we ultimately produce. And that kind of also just goes directly into budgets and how efficiently we can spend our money. Also, if we want more interesting architectural styles and different diversity of unit types for people with different situations, like maybe you want a multi-generational family living. Right now, that's pretty hard to build in Seattle. And just opening up certain parts of the city right now, basically, if you're anywhere, within a site of the water, you probably aren't allowed to build an apartment building. The city makes it legal to build a $10 million mansion, but if you want to divide that up and to let 30 people live there, that's currently illegal. which seems bad to me, but we gotta keep working to change it. And then there's a lot of other reasons to want better zoning for other things, like just giving people opportunity of whatever housing type best suits them at that stage in their life. There's definitely kind of one of the first rules of housing policy is there's no one type of housing that is right for everyone all of the time. So even as great as social housing is, it might not, work for someone at one point in their life or whatever. And so just allowing people the opportunity for more types of housing is important. It's also important for the landlord-tenant relationship. What we have right now in Seattle and in a lot of other cities is that there's not enough supply of housing. So we have tenants competing to be chosen by a landlord to be able to live in the building. But if we build a lot of housing, we could flip that dynamic and have landlords competing to attract tenants into their buildings. Which we have a ways to go from that, but wouldn't it be great? And as Representative Shaun Scott was talking about, ultimately zoning was literally invented to perpetuate racial and class segregation. And so if we want to eliminate that or do what we can to have kind of more diverse, inclusive communities, we're gonna have to eliminate or dramatically loosen the types of zoning that we have. And also climate. Living car-free is like the #1 climate solution that we can do on a city level, and zoning dictates what parts of the city you can feasibly do that. Okay, so here is the map of the mayor's proposal. So this is more or less going to be the final proposal from the mayor that will be sent to city council basically in early January. They will have the opportunity to amend it as they see fit, and then pass a zoning ordinance, and then ultimately pass the comprehensive plan itself. So the areas in blue are basically the existing urban villages, which are now called urban centers. The small little areas in brown and orange are the areas that are being proposed for like upzoning, are being proposed to have more density than they currently do. And I don't know about everyone's interpretation of this map, but to me it seems, like there's a lot of blue, and the browns and oranges are just small little additions drawn in there. If you go to your local community association meeting, they might have a different interpretation of that, and think that those brown lines represent a dramatic change to our city. But so we are potentially getting some more, and I guess, and as just a crude approximation, areas that are the blue and browns and oranges are areas where we would viably be able to build social housing. Areas in yellow are the historically single family only zones, also known as areas with apartment bans. And that's still going to be the vast majority of the city, which is not great, but also we're doing what we can. And so this slide represents what will be allowed in those yellow areas. And so this is a major focus of the comprehensive plan update because of state law that was passed. So speaking with our state representative, pretty much, I would say at least half of the kind of good things that are coming out of Seattle's comprehensive plan are only due to being forced to comply with the state minimums. And so that might be an avenue of change, is just forcing cities to do what's good for them, since they can't seem to always do what's good for themselves. So that's going to change from right now, where it's a single family house plus 2 ADUs, to potentially 4 units. One exciting thing in this proposal from the mayor is there is an affordable housing density bonus that would allow buildings such as pictured here on the right, which could be 8 units potentially in those single family house zones, if you include half of them as affordable housing, which is a good option, is not probably enough to get those built without public subsidy. But dramatic slide. Right now, nothing in the proposal really speaks to social housing at all. Really, the words are basically not existent in the comprehensive plan, which is a big disappointment given how much popular support we've seen that social housing got. And so this is one of our major policy asks, which it seems probably is not going to we're not going to get from the mayor, but we are hoping, or kind of have no other chance but to hope that city council will basically pass an amendment to have social housing parity, that any incentives that kind of traditional nonprofit affordable housing providers can get, that social housing would also be able to qualify for. So yeah, and then kind of our major things that we are continuing to advocate for. So I know that Shirley is on here, and Laura, that alternative 6 that we were, pushing for what seems like long ago, a year and a half ago, unfortunately is not really in the cards at this point. And so we are trying to make incremental change until we maybe elect different representatives at a future date. And so our focus on one of the main things is transit-oriented development. In the scoping of kind of what is permissible for city council to amend from the mayor's proposal, there's a lot of room for additional housing options in our transit corridors that the mayor has chosen not to utilize. So if the city council wants to do something big, probably focusing on taking advantage of our transit capacity and our frequent transit zones is the biggest thing that they would be able to do. Other important things are creating more housing options near some of our biggest and best parks that are currently surrounded by very expensive houses, and continue in this proposal to be off limits from any kind of apartments or other affordable housing, like Seward Park, where the mayor lives. And as mentioned, generally making sure that social housing gets the same kind of incentives and bonuses as other affordable housing. Yeah, go ahead, Laura.
Hi everyone, this is Laura Lowe speaking. When I see in the chat someone saying Magnuson Park could be an awesome new neighborhood center as well, and we've heard this for years. Councilmember Deborah Wars, who was there before Kathy Moore, promised the 800 affordable housing residents at Magnuson Park that they were going to get a grocery store as part of her, when she ran for office. She's like, we're going to get you a grocery store. That never happened. There's no grocery store at Magnuson Park for the folks that live there. And it's just like, it's the longer you see these patterns around land use, the more urgency you feel, because it's so easy for people to make election promises. And I just want to emphasize like how much I respect the work that Tech for Housing does. They're out there knocking on doors, they're talking to neighbors, they're canvassing, they're doing, you know, tapping into tech dollars and doing fundraising. And I just want to say, Scott, I've been a big fan of Tech for Housing for, 8 years or so that it's existed. And just the work that you've done in terms of being kind of a bridge between some of the less renter friendly and more market driven forces, and trying to bring folks along to understand what social housing is. It's just you and Suresh and Sheen and all the other folks have done great work. So just wanted to say that for personally, just that I'm a fan.
Thanks. Yeah, we're out here trying to build the communities that we want to live in, and I guess especially those of us that live in Seattle, right? There's a reason we don't live in Bellevue or Mercer Island or whatever. Like, but yeah, it definitely takes a whole coalition. Like, none of these things are easy to change, and just having that solidarity is important for everyone to kind of have the world we want to live in. Yeah, so I'll just kind of wrap up my section. So I think we're gonna kind of pivot into a more specific segment on how to have your voice heard, but we are right up at the deadline. So so this Friday is the last time to basically get your voice heard by the mayor and by the city. And so if you search One Seattle Plan is probably the easiest way to find the official portal. You can also email your representatives. So just after Tammy Morales announced that she will be resigning in January, Joy Hollingsworth has been nominated as the kind of replacement to chair the committee that will be working on this in City Council. So she is a important person to make sure you send your messages to. And then Sarah Nelson. Don't know how many Sarah Nelson's fans we have on this call, but she's going to be a critical decision maker on all of this. And so we, to the extent that any good things are going to happen and any bad things are going to stop from being happening, we probably need her to be on our side. So that might, use the tact and skills that you have to try to make that point. Yeah, I think that's it. I'm happy to answer questions or happy to move us along to any other agendas.
Thank you so much, Scott. That was great. And I also want to echo Laura's sentiments. Be like advocating for renters explicitly. Like, we run into a lot of people who are pro housing, but not necessarily pro renter. And I feel like Tech for Housing really does center the people who will be living in that housing, and that's so important. Okay, so it's 7:09. We are actually like a little bit ahead of schedule. We're doing awesome. And so I just want to kind of read the room. Do folks want to spend a little time talking to each other with this framework in mind, more about like what they envision for Seattle, or do we want to hop into it with Shirley to lead us in commenting? I feel like we lost a lot of people at that first breakout room, so I don't want to force people into breakout rooms again. And I'm seeing in the chat, people are excited about commenting, really excited. So I guess Shirley, if you're ready, we can hand it over to you to to lead us in making our opinions known before the deadline.
Hey, so bad at Zoom. Can you guys see my screen? Is it just like a form right now?
Yes, this is your contact info, first name, last name, email, zip code.
Perfect. You guys are about to go to that webpage. So if everybody actually already put it in the chat, I'll just put it one more time. If you guys want to just follow along, just go to alternative6.org. And that's what I'm showing on my screen right now. So this is a project that we've been working on for, I guess, multiple years now, since 2022, because there have been many different rounds of commenting that the city has asked for as we've gone through this comprehensive plan. So it first started, the first phase for commenting was in 2022. And that's why this website is called alternative6.org, because back then they gave us 5 alternatives and we thought they were all not good enough. None of them generated enough housing. So we made a coalition of people who were pushing for alternative 6. So that's why this is called alternative 6. We still want alternative 6, which we think will actually provide enough housing. And so we just kept this name, but also we paid for the domain. So there you go. So basically, if you go to this website, you can see, like, just for fun, if you want to, kind of how we helped people comment in previous phases. Sorry, my computer's kind of slow, so bear with me. But right now we're in this phase. So I'll be very honest with you guys. I'm not sure if it's called the final EIS phase. I've seen it called by the city many different things, the phase we're currently in right now. I am sure of what these phases were called in the past, so you can check those out. But do note that we might change this title, like it might to whatever the correct name is. For now, I've seen final EIS, so that's just what we're calling it right now. That's the current phase. All right, so anyways, do feel free to share this website with anybody and everybody. We try to make it really user-friendly. And so you really can do as little or as much as you want by just going to the centralized place, and it tells you all the places you can comment. So this time there's 3 places you will want to comment, and we put it in order of easy to difficult. If you just do this first one, you could do it in like 5 minutes. I'll do it with you guys in a moment. If you want to spend another couple minutes, you could do step 2, and then step 3 could expand into like 30 minutes if you wanted, depending how many comments you want to add. All right, so step 1 is going to this comment form. So like, again, you can Google search all of these links from the city, and then they'll be like, 1,000 characters long with many slashes, and it has like ArcGIS dot whatever dot whatever dot whatever. And you could bookmark that, or you could just go to this one website which has all the links in a clearer way. So that's why we want to promote just like going to this easy to use website. So yep, going to step 1, you can click this button, and I have already clicked it in case my computer is too slow or something. And you go to this form. This is a form, like I said, like this is just the URL you're supposed to bookmark, but this is from the city in their official portal. So you fill out your first name, last name, optional, email address, zip code, and then we give guidance on our website about what you can say to the city. Because I think that we've found that a lot of people are like have strong opinions and want to comment, but it's just hard to start with a blank page. Like, what are you supposed to say? What are like the important things that you can say that the other people are saying, so that they are hearing the same important messages from all of us? And also, you only get 1,000 characters. So how are you supposed to keep it concise, right? So here on our website, we're trying to help you guys with all of that. So yeah, first thing, once you have this form open, just choose what topic does your comment address. Oops, wrong one. What topic does your comment address? The rezone proposal in general. What do you like about the current proposal? We give suggestions here. and then they pop up in this box over here, and you can just click copy and paste it right in. So like that. And we have this counter for you, so you can like try to jam as many in there as possible. Oh, it looks like if you jam all of them, you can still add more. So you can still like type in this box. I also like blah blah blah. Yep.
Yeah, I'm gonna drop my, when you're done, I'm gonna drop my op-ed that I did with two renter neighbors in the chat when you're done, to be like, and if you need more ideas, so just so you know, let me know when that's time to do that.
Laura, do it anytime. And we actually had a place where we just ran out of time because we were doing this right up to when this meeting started, because our day jobs are very demanding right now. But we can also put a link to that like on the page itself too, Laura. And we have done that in the past. So like for example, in the draft EIS phase, we had these additional resources. So we compiled op-eds from everybody, talking points from everybody. So I have links to all these things. We just haven't had a chance to get them here yet, and there's only 2 more days. So sorry. But yeah, maybe tonight you can come here and see those pop up for additional resources. Yeah, so basically you can copy this, then go to the next question in the form. What changes to the proposal would you like to see? Can do a similar generation there. And then when you're done reaching the 1,000 character limit, copy that text and put it right here. We also made it so that you can, like we kind of put in order what we like, so the number one thing we put here for what changes to proposal would you like to see, just as Scott was pointing out, we want to have the city align the affordable housing bonus with the Seattle social housing developers mixed income model. So basically giving all of the social housing that would be developed the same bonuses that affordable housing would get. So they could, have a couple of extra stories or whatever it is for their buildings. And then like, we as Share the Cities and Jackson Park for All and stuff, we're known for advocating for more housing near parks, transit places where it's safe to bike, where there's sidewalks, all that kind of thing. So we have each of those talking points. Choose your favorite or click them all, whatever fits in the 1,000 characters that you like most. And we also have this drop down to let you kind of say what you want, because it's like, so we have this generic statement like all areas within a 20-minute walk or 15-minute bike ride of speaker and transit should be upzoned to allow. And then we just default to social housing, but you could say high rises. You might be into that kind of thing. Like you want towers everywhere. So you can, customize that. And then that'll go over automatically to this place where you can just copy all of the text from the box. And then you can obviously also edit whatever you want. So you don't want houses near volunteer, fine, remove that one and keep the other parks. Yep. So that's step number 1. Again, hopefully that's like a fast one, like 5 minutes, unless you're agonizing over the exact wording, but you don't need to agonize. We put the wording here for you so you don't have to do that. Step 2 is...
Wait, Shirley, can we take 5 to do it?
Oh yeah, sure. Do you guys want to just do it right now?
Yeah.
Yeah, we could, everybody takes 5 minutes and submits a comment, and then if people want to read their comments, they could.
Good idea, yeah. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing. I haven't done this yet either. I was gonna do it tomorrow night, so I'll do it too. And do feel free to speak up at any moment if you have questions about what any of the points are saying.
I was also going to speak to Jen's comments in the chat. So Jen, I see that you're concerned about like toxic environment and gas stations and Pride Place being built near gas stations, and the Eco District in Capitol Hill being toxic, where community roots housing is a lot of their housing. I think all those kinds of points there, you can put them into the comment. You can use the alternative 6 comment generator and form to submit, to copy and paste those comments in there. It's it's not going to necessarily be addressed in the comprehensive plan in terms of the zoning maps legislation. Like all this does is determine how tall or how short or how wide or how narrow something is built on a piece of land. It doesn't limit based on the like environmental issues, except if it's like a steep slope or something. So a lot of times stuff that's on a steep slope, even if it gets rezoned, it won't get built for environmental reasons. But the topics you're bringing up about environmental, the fact that traditionally affordable housing has been built on areas that are more dangerous is 100% supported by fact across the country and across North America. You know, I live in Inner Bay, which is over just south of the Ballard Bridge. There's been a lot of talk of when the National Guard moves, putting a lot of new housing over on the National Guard land that's sandwiched between 15th Avenue, which is basically a highway, and the rail yard, which emits a lot of diesel emissions that I breathe every day. I have a lot of concerns about building a whole new, you know, eco district there. There's a couple of DESC buildings over here. There's the RV safe lot areas right by my house or my apartment, and some tiny house villages. So we are already seeing in Inner Bay that a lot of folks, lower income, no income, formerly unhoused folks, are being put near areas that are more polluted. So I just wanted to validate what Jen was saying around there's like a history of that. And I have been doing this work as a volunteer now for a couple of years, but before that, trying to be paid to do this work. And I don't think there's a connection between the comp plan and those kinds of deeper environmental concerns around like citing stuff near like toxic areas. But I might be wrong, but FutureWise is the organization that has the legal people that would know that. So Tim is their lawyer. And I encourage you to reach out to FutureWise with those concerns. And I can drop their information.
I'd just add that in general, right now we do concentrate a lot of growth in limited areas. And so if we allow more housing options in more areas, you know, people can choose to live, you know, away from pollution. If they have a particular concern, they'll have more options to be able to escape that. Whereas right now, you know, we concentrate a lot of the affordable housing next to industrial zones or under the airport flight path or something, and there's fewer options to avoid those kind of environmental hazards. But if we have more options, people could choose to live in the nice places that we don't let them live right now.
But I think a comment for the comprehensive plan that relates to what Jen is saying would maybe sound something like, I'm concerned that in the past, affordable housing has been concentrated in areas that have environmental pollution. And I think one way to like reverse that trend would be to make sure that more of the areas of the city that have been, that don't have the history of either pollution from cars or environmental factors are opened up to more options. Like, I think that those are kind of the two sentences that you would write.
Yep, totally agree.
Does anyone have anything else in the chat that like they want to put their comment in the chat, or anything having to do with maps? I know I've been really focused on my neighborhood, which is Northwest Queen Anne. I haven't actually gone into the exact maps and done my comment in the exact maps yet, because I don't have a computer anymore. I just have my iPad and it's hard to navigate, but I might do that tonight. Yay, Rachel submitted comments. Woo!
I just did mine too.
Yay, Kate. Woo!
I had to cut it down. I eliminated Genesee Park because I feel like They love to come for the South End anyway. So if I
Fair
have
enough.
to take out some words, that would be.
I'm so happy I got mine done because I haven't been able to do much just because I have a very demanding job at Nordstrom this time of year. So I'm just really happy to finally get some things done with Kate Rubin, who's doing amazing work. And thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, my plan is I feel like we just need to that now more than ever. I think this is time to put our legislators, our policymakers, our council members, our president, all of us need to be literally holding our their feet to the fire because yes, a lot of progressives are getting elected. Yes, that's great. But also let's not rest too much and be like, oh yeah, assume that they're going to get things done when they might get pressured into doing something else. So we need to be making sure that we don't rest until progressive legislation is passed, that everything is getting accomplished. So yeah, let's hold our policymakers to feet to the fire. Now is not the time to rest. Now is the time to fight and stay in the fight until we get shit done.
Yeah. Say like agreed. But I also want to say like I need no credit for this. This is all the Share the City is volunteers for this beautiful and accessible program. And I really love this because it didn't feel very accessible to me as a renter and as somebody who really has a hard time like articulating very, very specific things when I'm looking at a blank page. And I did this so fast. I did it and I feel great about it. Who needs more time before Shirley moves on to the next? Okay, I'm seeing just a little bit more time here. Penny, you want to like give us a thumbs up when you're ready? We have time. We actually built in like a big chunk of time for the workshop to make sure that folks could get it done while we're all sitting here together.
Yeah, I'm hoping to get to that part where I go to the actual map and zoom in on my street and comment. Something I can fill the time and tell you about Kate is where I live over at Nickerson and 15th by the Ballard Bridge. When the bridge gets redone in the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be about 100 units of housing and maybe 300 to 400 people that live in that housing. Many of them have lived there for decades, and that building is going to be destroyed. So the people in that building, they don't know this. Most of them don't know this yet, but the plans for the new Ballard Bridge that's going to be much taller than the current Ballard Bridge include widening the on-ramp for trucks so that trucks can actually make it up to the bridge because it's going to be very, very steep. So they're going to have to take out all the buildings around me to allow for the trucks to be able to get up and over the Ballard Bridge so that super yachts from billionaires can get under the bridge without it going up and down. So this all goes back to super yachts. I'm not kidding. So 400 people are going to lose their homes because of super yachts. It's not that like I'm oversimplifying it, but I just think it's something to think about. Like, since we're talking about long-term land use and like the comprehensive plan, the changes we make now, we won't see for 10 years, but in 10 years, the people across the street from me are going to need relocation assistance and all sorts of things. And some of them, I know some of them have been living there since like maybe like the 80s. So, I mean, it's not like affordable housing, it's market rate housing, but you know, if you live somewhere for that long, you know, you just have it'll be really traumatizing for folks.
Also, with relocation assistance, it's only limited to households that earn up to 50% of the area median income, which is really not very much money when it comes to paying for market rate housing.
No, I've been thinking about going over across the street and handing out flyers and saying like, hey, do you know your building's going to be demolished in 10 years? If you want relocation assistance, you're going to have to start fighting for it now. like for 10 years from now, like no joke.
Yeah.
But, you know, I guess I just want to like mention to folks that like, there's lots of other ways that land use impacts renters, and that was just another example.
Okay, are we feeling ready to move on to the next? It's also, thank you for sharing that example. I got, thank you. Are we ready to move on to the next piece? I see a nod.
Shirley, show us the next part.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Before I go further, I want to give a big shout out to James. He's on the call right now. He is the one that coded up this website. So huge kudos to him, our resident software dev. Okay, so for this next part, you'll take the work that you've already done in step 1 and scroll down on the page, and you'll be able to populate what you've already written up here into an email to Mayor Harrell and the Seattle City Council members. So you should just be able to, I think you just click in this box and everything you selected up here and put in this box, these 2 boxes, just become part of this email. So we added this kind of intro paragraph to say how important, like politically important, this issue is to us. And we expect them to do what we say. And then we put our comment that we generated. And then we have this place where you can add any optional stories or experiences. So this would be a great place, for example, for Jen, if you want to add more kind of what we were talking about. And then adding your name. And once you've done that, you can open your email, copy all that text, and then send the email off to the addresses we put here, bruce.seattle.gov and council@seattle.gov, which should go to all of the council members. If you want to get individually like each council member's address and put it in that way, that's fine. We just did this because of lack of time. So yeah, I don't think there's a difference between sending to this email versus each individual council member, but people on this call I'm sure would know about that.
No, there's no difference. The only thing I would say is that, like, for the subject, if all the subject lines coming from our workshop are different and all the first paragraphs are the same, you might want to make something in that first paragraph that's like a little bit yours, like, hi, I'm a renter in 98119, or whatever. Like, the more that you can make it, or like, I've been a renter in Seattle for 15 years, or, me and my family and my dog live over by such and such park. Like, anything you can do to like humanize it. Again, kind of what Kate was saying earlier is that a lot of the opposition to renters is that we're like some sort of special interest group, or that we're not like regular Seattleites, even though we make up more than 55% of the city, and in the case of Shaun Scott's district, over 70% of the district. But because most of the people that council members interact with in their day-to-day lives, like on the weekends, are other homeowners and other landowners and other landlords and property owners, they just like, renters are like invisible to them. Like, renters is like their child after college before they hand them their trust fund and then they get their house, right? So like, that's their experience of renting. They don't understand like what working people are dealing with. Sorry if that was too harsh, but so try to make your first couple of sentences, personalized if you can.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Laura. We also add this note about making the email subject quite unique. So we've heard that for council members who have counted things as form letters, they often just do that by looking at the subject line. So whenever there's like 100 of the same subject line, they'll be like, okay, that's 100 form letters. So if you try to make the subject, like do what Laura said for sure, and then also make the subject like uniquely yours too, I think that helps with that issue as well.
And if you want to talk to them and you want to meet with them, you can make in the subject of your email. I've done this a lot to council members, where in the subject of my email, I write in parentheses meeting request. And then in my first paragraph, I'll say like, I'm Laura, I'm a renter in Northwest Queen Anne, and I'd really like to meet with you in the next 2 months. Can you forward this to your staff scheduler so that we can set up some time to meet? And like, if you put that in the subject and you put it in the first couple of sentences, they'll forward it. And especially if you're a voter in that person's, unfortunately, since we went to district councils, a lot of times only your district council member will meet with you. In the old days when we weren't districted, they would all meet with anyone. So we kind of, I feel like, lost some of our power when we went to districted council members. But that is my very biased opinion. Not everyone agrees with it. But meeting with your council member, you usually only get like 10 or 15 minutes. And it takes many times of those 10 or 15-minute meetings to really build a relationship with them. Like it could take a whole year of every couple of months meeting them for 10 minutes with them to really build that relationship. I wrote to a council member, Bob Kettle, the other day. He wrote back. I mentioned in the email that I had COVID, and he wrote back to my email and said, I'm sorry, and I hope you feel better. And it was the first time he's written back to me since all the times I've ever written to him, because I did make it personal and I was vulnerable and I said that I was sick. So, I didn't do that as a strategy or a tactic, but it did end up being, a thing that inspired a personal response from him. Anything that humanizes you, because they're getting hundreds of emails a day. So anything that makes you like a human being in their community.
What are we putting for the subject? We're putting different subjects, but like, what's the general?
You could say like, renters need more places to live, or I want more neighbors in Queen Anne, or I want renters to live near our beautiful parks, or more people are going to move here and we need to make room for them. You could specifically call out like, the original proposal was much bolder. We've already shrunk it a bunch. Let's not shrink it anymore. I would say in general, like if you're going to insult someone or yell at them or get emotional, you might not want to do it in your subject. You might want to save that for the body of your email. But
if you guys want to, maybe we can put our subjects into the chat just for ideas, and also to not use exactly one. Mine's one.
I have to see what I said to Bob Kettle.
James put his, that's a good one. I also wanted to note, this isn't very important, but you can violate the 1,000-character limit in your email, obviously. So if you want to jam more stuff in there.
I went back and added every single talking point.
Nice.
And now I'm personalizing it.
Exactly. That's perfect.
I want corner stores in every neighborhood, but I don't want garbage trucks that are gonna come to my neighborhood before 6:30 in the morning. I think I'm all for density, and I'm all for more neighbors, and I'm all for rezones, and I'm all for commercial businesses in residential zones. But can we just not have loud garbage trucks really early? There's like 4 right in my area, and because I'm 1 block away from an area, the noise ordinances for trucks don't apply. So sometimes we have garbage trucks at like 4 or 5 in the morning on my street. And it's rough, guys. I'll just be honest.
Or not.
Yeah, cities aren't loud, cars are loud.
The trucks are rough.
Trucks are rough. And that's where they want to concentrate all of the limited increase in housing directly on the arterials that will hear all of that noise.
Something that no one's brought up in this workshop or the last one. Did we bring this up in the last one? Is that if they just build new housing in the areas that already have apartments, that it means more apartments are going to get torn down for new apartments, like the older buildings. But if we spread it out, it's like less of that will happen. So I'm going to make that point in my email. The workshop's so quiet because we're all working. Unless everybody just left. Is everyone still here?
A lot of people are still here.
I'm still here. I'm just working still.
It's just so quiet. I'm like, I just
Yeah.
want to make sure everyone's working. I know I'm still working too.
I'm still working. It looks like a few people have dropped off, but they dropped off after we did the easiest commenting exercise, which I think was the goal, like to
That's
get
good,
people to
yeah.
say something.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay, here is my subject.
Ooh, drum roll.
Oh, Seattle means everyone should have a home.
That's so good.
You guys did a really good job with this website.
Thank you. James is probably frantically doing stuff still on it. So I'm like, found some errors. If you guys find any little errors, or if you want stuff added to it, like if you have ideas for comments you want other people to say, we are happy to add those. And in the past phases, we've crowdsourced a lot of them. A lot of the ones on here are crowdsourced too. So yeah, just.
And if anyone wants to get really wonky and understand what like minimum parking mandates are, or why they're bad, or like how Shoreline and some other city just passed a thing against them, and if little cities are doing it, we can do it too. Ask away. This is your time. Like if there's anything that is on the website that doesn't make sense, you might not agree with us. Like you might actually be like, you know what? I don't want corner stores everywhere, or I don't want this there. That's okay. Like, if you disagree with us, that's totally fine. This is just like you're not starting from a blank page. You don't have to just post what you want. If you're watching this later and you don't agree with any of the things on Alternative 6, that's fine. You can still use it to send your own comment with your own things that you care about. So this just kind of makes the process more accessible for anyone that wants to say anything.
I
Yeah, we
think
try to also keep jargon off, but there's still some jargon on there for sure.
I have a question, comment, concern, I guess, because I think, we're facing climate change, and we have a lot of trees in Seattle, but we're losing canopy, and they have so many important functions. And I think density is really important and necessary, but I also think trees are really important and necessary, and it's not enough to just have the trees in the parks. And unfortunately, they're often building it probably more cheaply, and getting rid of trees when they could build sometimes more housing, smaller units in areas that have trees, so that they can kind of build around trees. But instead they're just, cutting. There was new, legislation, a year and a half ago or something, that came through around being able to eliminate more trees from residential properties. So like, it's like, for me, there's nothing in this, I'm working on social housing, and I've been doing leafleting and stuff, but, and I was a signature gatherer for the I-35, 135. But I'm just troubled as to like how to, it's almost like either you're for density or you're for trees.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
I'm for both.
Yeah.
I'm for both, and they can't just be in parks. They really need to be where people are living.
Yeah.
So how do we, I don't have a good comment for that at this point.
I'm going to go sideways, and then I'm going to go back to your question. So when I lived in the U District, I was renting a house that was like, 80 years old, and I rented it for 9 years. And there's this beautiful tree out front, which is why I chose to rent that house. I loved the shade it provided, and it was beautiful. And the sidewalk in front of the apartment was completely buckled, wasn't ADA accessible. The spot outside the street would fill with water, and we called it like, we had like a name for it. We named it like a lake. And then our sewer failed because of the tree roots had gone into the sewer. Because the landlord was out of state and like they didn't do anything. So our sewer was leaking. There were tree roots growing into like the side of the foundation. And in a lot of cases, the most tree removal that's happening is on single family homes in Seattle. And it's happening so people can have views, or for genuine reasons like the sewer, or the sidewalk is buckling and things like that. So yes, developers are clear cutting lots that when trees could be preserved because it saves them money. Yes, when single family homeowners are selling to a developer, they might cut down the trees while they're still the owner as a way to get around the rules. That happens a lot, where a single family homeowner is like, cashing out. They bought it for $90,000 in the 90s, and now they're selling it for 1.8 million, in whatever year it is. And so they can afford, as part of the sale of their house, to clear cut the lot in advance. That's definitely happening. There's tons of street trees across the street from me, that old cherry trees that were at the end of their life, that have slowly fallen down one by one on top of cars. I've seen 3 cars crushed, and there's a 4th tree left that one day is going to crush another car. the people that live in across the street in the condo haven't done anything to replace those trees because they can't afford to dig out the tree wells where the root systems are and then put in new trees. And so the building across the street can't afford to fix their elevator, much less fix the tree situation. So I agree with you that we have a tree issue. I don't think zoning or not zoning, especially if you go back to Scott's map and you look at the kind of parts of the city that are brown and blue and how little of the city at this point the zoning maps that were put out initially, that alternative 5 that all of us wanted, alternative 6, it's been whittled away so much over the last 2 years already that what we're left with now is really not I think that high risk to trees that maybe truly the alternative 6 plan might have been. So I guess as someone who cares a lot about trees, I have a degree in plant biology. I'm friends with Sandy, the tree lady. I've gone to tree protests. I wrote an op-ed with the guy from Birds Connect, formerly Audubon, about trees on Earth Day 3 years ago. Like, I think about trees all the time. I cried when a tree got cut in front of my apartment for like 3 weeks. I cry over trees. So I guess as someone that loves trees, I feel like there's so many things outside of the comp plan that we need to do about trees that the kind of the cost benefit analysis for me, I do think it is a little bit of a sacrifice and a trade-off. And I do think there will be more like lots cleared than I would like. But I guess I've kind of come to peace with it. That's just speaking for myself. I'm not speaking for any organization or B Seattle or anyone. I think I'm in the minority in a lot of urbanists about this topic, because a lot of urbanists are weighing like farmland and urban sprawl versus they're looking at the big, like, 3-county picture. But as someone that wants to live on a block with a lot of trees, I do get selfish about trees pretty quickly. So that's my long answer. I don't know if anyone else wants to say anything.
I'll just throw out my pet policy proposal is that so regulating private property to force people to keep trees or force people to cut down trees or whatever is contentious, hard to control. But Seattle owns or controls about 1/3 of the city through our right-of-ways, also known as our streets. And we have a lot of on-street parking that could be turned into street trees. And we can focus that in the areas that are most deprived of tree canopy. And yeah, I would love to kind of form a coalition around that, since that's a way we can avoid pitting trees against housing. We pit trees against cars.
Yeah, I think that I agree with everything everyone said already. I will say that in my neighborhood, we don't have more trees because of the cars. So I live in Lake City, and we have that situation where all of the apartment buildings have just parking that are in front of their buildings that are all those kind of ones right next to each other, so that there's no sidewalk and then it's just those parking spaces. And honestly, only like 15% of them are taken up like at any given time, but they all just have to be there. If all of those just became a sidewalk and trees instead, it completely transform the neighborhood. We wouldn't have to, we already have a lot of density where I live. It doesn't, it's not a matter of there being density that there's not trees, it's there being parking spaces that there's not trees. So I really think that that's where we can gain the most. And like Laura, I also cry when I see a tree cut down. And in my neighborhood that's closest to me in terms of a single family neighborhood, Olympic Hills, they cut down their big, beautiful trees all the time just because they like lawns. And literally there's these 100-year-old, three of them, just the last month, somebody just cut them down and they added grass because that's what they want. And I think there's like an education piece there too of like it's not just trees. Like we don't have to just, I'm a climate scientist by training, so I'm like very obsessed about, carbon storage as well as like native plants and stuff. So it's not honestly just about trees, it's about planting like a beautiful, diverse native plant habitat. There's pollinators to consider, there's stormwater. A lot of times trees are not the best for stormwater, actually. There's many species of native grasses that are actually best for that. They may actually sequester, like wetland type things can sequester, like stormwater type, like infrastructure can sequester even sometimes even more carbon than trees can. If that's your concern, it looks beautiful. It can look beautiful too. Again, it absorbs more water. So so it's not just trees, it's vegetation in general. And also just one last point about it is like the more we can do to slow and stop climate change, which one big thing we can do is build more dense housing, which then enables more transit to be available and used, the more we can save trees in general. We just saw with the big, storm we just had, like I don't know if you guys saw the pictures like on the news, how many trees died or were just like knocked down because it was like a freak storm. With climate change, Seattle is expected to get more and more freak storms like that. Like thousands of trees are going to die, or hundreds, every time we have a storm like that. Um, so the more we can do to, and also there have been studies done by the city itself showing that there's actually a lot of trees dying all over, even in parks, because the temperatures are increasing. And if you guys remember, like the 2021 heat wave that killed like so many plants all around me in my neighborhood, I watched them die because it was like 115 degrees in my neighborhood because it's a urban heat island. And so again, like if we really cared about trees, people's access to trees, their ability to see the trees and enjoy them, it's taking away the cars, it's stopping climate change.
It's not a topic that makes me comfortable or that it's easy for me. It's something that I've thought about a lot and really struggled with. I tried to build bridges between tree advocates and urbanists a lot, especially during the pandemic. I really spent a couple of years trying to build those bridges. There's a lot of people standing in their corners and not coming together. I try to kind of gravitate to people that are kind of both and thinkers, like Shirley and Kate and others that are, no offense, usually femme folks, that can kind of hold multiple truths at the same time around these topics. But I have encouraged B Seattle to do a tree focused workshop and to bring in tree folks and have a really robust discussion around trees, because I think that that could be a place where some of these conversations, could be had around and coming up with more solutions. Because if you do look at the areas that renters are kind of forced to live in Seattle, they tend to be areas with less trees. And so that's just in general, how do we fix that too? How do we re-tree those areas where renters are being kind of segregated to under this plan?
I just wanted to add that I definitely went back and resent my another email to my council members and the mayor, and I made it a lot more personal regarding my district. I live in District 2, which is Tammy Morales's district, and she is officially she's resigning. So I made sure that I addressed them to them that my concern was what's going to happen in the future regarding her departure. She's worked tirelessly with urbanization and social housing. She's been a lone voice and everything. So I just made that more known, and I also made it more known that the reason it has to happen is because many people in my district are shooting up with fentanyl. They are shooting. They are feeling hopeless about the future. This is a great place. This is a Seattle. This is a city that creates a lot of wealthy people, but it also needs to be for the working class, don't forget we had Seattle grunge, we had Alice in Chains, we had Nirvana. So we need to bring some of that back, some of that rebel back. And I definitely did not mention grunge in my email, but I mentioned how we definitely, my concern in my district. And I also mentioned that I would be willing to meet with anyone. So.
So I do want to do a time check. It's 8 o'clock technically. We are out of time. And I did want to note for anyone here or anyone who is watching the recording that the city council will be appointing someone to that district, the District 2 position. And there is certainly no harm in telling the council members what you want to see out of the person in that position, or there's always the option of throwing your hat in the ring. So I wanted to just gauge, Shirley, I know you have been working very long hours. So if we want to cut it here now, I would be completely good with that. Or if you want to take a few minutes to just show us that next zoom in and comment. Either decision, I will be 100% behind.
I'd be happy to show the last part. I think I'll probably hop off before doing the working part of that part, but happy to just show it for sure. So yeah, so this is step 3. So you guys have already completed steps 1 and 2 now, which is just puts you already as an A+ student. But if you want to be an A++ student, do extra credit, you can do this step 3. So this is I also say that because it's pretty not user friendly to me. Like, you're going to this map, so you click on this button, you're gonna get taken to this thing that for my computer takes like forever to load. Sometimes it freezes. So you'll go explore the map, and then you're gonna zoom in like with your scroll wheel or whatever to the parts of the city that you want to comment on most. So we wrote, here that there's kind of 3 different types of places we recommend adding comments on the map. It's where you actually live because you know it best, and you be able to say, hey, I want, a store here, or like another high rise here, whatever it is. You can also go to exclusive, like wealthy neighborhoods that you want more housing in and explicitly call those out. And then kind of related to number 2, you can go to places where there's like big parks, or there's frequent transit, or there's bike lanes, or there's stay healthy streets with sidewalks that should have more housing, and comment in those places. And then here we give suggestions for what you can say. So you can do something as simple as going to the spot on the map you want to see another neighborhood center in. And then you can just copy paste this sentence or type it in if you want. There should be another neighborhood center here. So for example, you can see how it kind of doesn't work very quickly. And I haven't done this myself yet, so I think I tried it like the first day I was there, but I haven't tried it since then. So you activate all this, and then you can click on the map to add a point. So I want a neighborhood center right here. You can click there, and then slow fill this in, say what your comment address is, and then write your comment. There. Again, we have things you can say in this list, and yeah, there's this one at the top that we want everyone to do. So we want everybody to go to the Seward Park neighborhood where Bruce Harrell lives and say that there should be a neighborhood center there, because it's absolutely egregious that he excluded his own neighborhood from having any more density. If I can manage to make this map full. Seward Park is down here. So, oh, I guess I should say something about this map itself. So this map is telling you like where all the different proposed zoning things are gonna happen. So where you see like blue, that's just think of it like anything other than yellow is adding density. So places that are just yellow like this are trying to escape from doing their part in adding more housing. And the one that stands out to me the most, because Bruce Harrell got any additional density that was going to be proposed here removed where he lives, I think we need to focus on that area and say there has to be more density there. So that's why we put this one as the first one that everyone can do. Yeah, so I think probably for this part, there's probably like troubleshooting. So is anybody trying to load this, trying to get it to work and it's not working, that we can try to help walk each other through?
It's slow.
It's so slow. That's
I
why
think that I still want to know if this is accessible to people that are blind and low vision. Like, I'm really curious how somebody with a screen reader interacting with this, how it would work.
it's a great question. I mean, it's
No
barely,
one's been able to answer that. I've asked the city and no one ever told me. Like, I asked it in the virtual session. They didn't feature my comment. No one's answered that. It's bananas. And I didn't go to any of the in-person workshops because I got sick, but was there any braille? Was there anyone doing like interpretation? Like, it just bugs me because it's like I don't even want to know how much money we spent on the like outreach for this as a city. Anyway, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is fully accessible. Maybe the reason they did GIS is because it is an accessible map and I just don't know enough to know. But I would like to have the confirmation. Anyway,
I honestly don't see how, because the thing is, the links that we use in alternative6.org are already very special links in the sense that we have ripped these ArcGIS websites out of the embeds that
yeah,
the city has done
yeah,
and directly link to them. So if you manage to find the ones that the city provides, it's even because it's a website inside a website.
I
And when you're
know.
scrolling or zooming, you don't know which part it's operating on, and it is significantly more frustrating on a phone, or I would imagine in any sort of accessibility instrument.
Yeah, it just seems wildly, it seems inaccessible from many levels, from a disability justice level and also from like uh the new guidance in a lot of spaces around plain language and communication are like a 5th to 7th grade like kind of reading and comprehension level in order to accommodate people across a wide variety of access and functional needs. And I don't feel like this process is I was a middle school teacher and I don't feel like this would be accessible to like my 8th grade students, much less 5th grade students. So I just also really am concerned about the like, it's like super gatekeeping to make it wasn't like this last time. It wasn't this hard 8 years ago because they do this every 8 years. So I don't know, that's just like another thing that I think favors people that are like educated, wealthy, have time to figure this out, et cetera, et cetera. Or like we heard at that Madrona meeting the other night, you know, that they want to lawyer up so the lawyer just takes care of their comment for them.
I have a question about the map. Because I've already got it loaded, I don't want to click on anything else, but do you know if you make your comment publicly available if your email address is displayed?
that's a really good question. James, do you know?
I don't think it is.
I don't think so either.
I think the reason they're asking for email, and that's another thing that like, you know, some people don't want to give their government their email, is that the environmental impact statement process, this is the final EIS, they legally have to respond to every comment. So under the state land use laws, under the environmental impact statement laws that this process is, they have to technically like go line by line and like and respond to all of our comments. So yeah, it just says like Beth says. Blah, blah,
Yeah,
blah.
I think this is an example, Kate. So I think it'll just say the first name,
Yeah,
and then the comment.
the
And
email is just because they legally have to respond to every single person, because it's a very like regulated process.
I was also gonna say this. It's like not only all the accessibility issues you guys already brought up, but you also need a good enough computer that can like even do this. My computer is 10 years old, so it struggles a little.
I'm not even trying because I'm on an iPad and like I'm gonna see if I can borrow a friend's laptop and do it tomorrow.
Yeah, that's smart. There's one more thing I was gonna say, which is that you guys can click around and look at the list of comments and upvote them. But I personally do not recommend using your time that way, because in the first phase, we thought that was important. We tried to turn people out to upvote certain comments. We got hundreds on the ones we turned people out for, but the city pretty much seemed to completely ignore them. Like they didn't do any analysis with them, didn't mention them at all. And
They
so
didn't even mention the word social housing when the most voted comment was from Real Change around Real Change wanting social housing and rezones. And that was the most upvoted comment. And they didn't even mention that anywhere in their reports. They like left it out.
yeah.
So it was like
Thousands of
it made a
comments.
lot of people by now just kind of not feel like their comment matters, which is like really bad for democracy when people don't feel like they're being heard.
The second time around, they had people comment on a PDF. The PDF had maps, and you could also put a comment on a specific point on the map. So a lot of people left comments like, this is my neighborhood, et cetera, et cetera. As it turns out, the location of where you put your comment in the second phase did not matter. The city just ignored all of the locations. So the comments that are like, this is my neighborhood, it was not associated with any place on the map. So that was also exceptionally frustrating, the way the city decided to handle that. This is now a real map. So presumably the city will actually go and look at where the location your comment is attached to this time around. But there has been a lot of these mistakes.
I'm recovering from COVID. I'm trying not to have a coughing fit because it's like mistakes or like purpose willful yeah, anyway. But hopefully everybody feels like they accomplished something tonight. I feel like I accomplished something.
I definitely feel like I did.
It was
I
nice
you.
meeting you.
I did at least I did make my one comment in Seward Park. I will make more comments, but at least that one's done in case anything goes awry in the next 2 days. And then I did the email. I did the
I
floor.
did the email, yeah.
So mission accomplished for this workshop, at least for me personally.
Good job, buddy.
So thank you Shirley and Scott and also Laura for helping to put this together. And James, I know you didn't speak, but also that alternative 6 is so good. It's just so good. I want you to know how much like just normal people and renters appreciate it. This would not have been accessible to me otherwise, I don't think. And with that, I'm gonna stop the workshop. Thank you all. Get some dinner. Have a great night.
Have a